Hi everyone, it's Marissa and Lockie here. Marissa from Rise High and
Lockie from Turner Real Estate.
And today we're here to bring you the first quarterly property market update of 2022. Hard to believe that we're already we're already 1 month into 2022, aren't we, Lockie?
That's it. Well, I just feel like the year's only just getting going with all the holidays and the COVID and everything going on. But we're on now, so
yes, we are on.
And the kids are back at school this morning as well. So
yes.
Some of them are, some of them aren't. So yeah.
So definitely interesting times, and there's been a lot happening in the property market. It's still very hot, isn't it, Lockie?
Yeah, well, the Adelaide market, if we look at it in comparison right across Australia, it's Brisbane and Adelaide are still the two strongest performing markets. Sydney and Melbourne have slowed a bit, as have all other areas, but Brisbane and Adelaide are still strong and carrying through the momentum from last year.
Yeah, I was looking at some stats, and Adelaide's gone up another, 7.2% in the last quarter, up till the end of December. And Australia, on average, was only 3.9%. So consider Adelaide's really outpaced the Australian average. And over the last 12 months, that's over 23% growth for Adelaide market.
And I think we have to ask ourselves why that's occurring. And there are three main reasons. One is it's still the affordability of housing in Adelaide. It's still sort of some of the cheapest property right across Australia for a capital city.
Yes.
Something that's happened to Adelaide as well, which hasn't happened for 20 plus years, is that we're getting a net positive inflow of people coming from interstate. And we certainly saw that last year because we're at the coalface and see these things first with buyers making inquiries on properties and things, and a lot more people coming home from Sydney and Melbourne and so on. And the other third point, I'm just trying to remember what that was. It was net inflow. It was housing affordability.
Could it be rental yields? Because I know that Adelaide's got one of the strongest rental yields in the country. So you can really get
that, and it's stock levels as well was the third one. Sorry, I've just read all my notes this morning. I'm all getting up, and I'm just trying to make sure I have it in the brain. But it is the number of stock levels as well. So it's the amount of house for sale is still very, very low. In fact, we're 35% still down on the 5-year average. When properties are coming up for sale, they're still in very, very high demand.
Yeah, so obviously, property values move based on demand and supply, and obviously with stock levels being low, which have been low for the last, would you say, 12, 18 months?
Indeed. In fact, every year on year, the stock levels do seem to get lower and lower and lower, and the people that own nice property in good locations, they sort of tend to be more in demand than ever. So so it's quite a disparate market because it depends on what type of property you own and where it is, but certainly the premium areas and the nice homes that are Torrens title on land, maybe like a period home or something modern and new, they are in demand big time, and we're seeing some big prices. We didn't sell it, but a property in Vale Park just sold last week, 850 square metres on a corner block, and it sold for 1.87 million. So after some taxes, you're $2 million for a block of land in Vale Park, and it's about 850 square metres. So those are the sorts of things that are going on, which is extraordinary. And you build a house and something decent, and landscaping, everything else, you're up around the 3 million mark.
Yep. I know that at the beginning of last year, when COVID was going really crazy, I mean it still is, but stock levels were really, really low because people were just scared. They didn't want to sort of sell because they didn't know if they could buy. At the end of last year, did that sort of change a little bit? Like, are we starting to see a bit more stock coming onto the market, or a bit more willingness from vendors to put their house on the market? Is that sort of slowly starting to change a little bit in the Adelaide market, would you say? Or would you say that it's still pretty much
I still think it's pretty tight, but the stats are nationally that there was a surge in the amount of property that hit the market. And the reason I say nationally is because other states had far worse lockdowns than we did, in particular in Victoria.
Yes.
So Australia's always just sort of been open for business. So our sort of stock levels haven't really changed too much, but nationally they definitely have. There was a big surge right at the end of last year after the lockdowns. But I think people and this is the fascinating thing, everyone thought the market might go down 30%, when we got hit by COVID, but it's actually gone completely the opposite direction, which is fascinating. And I think people value property more than they ever used to, particularly if you've got a garden and you've got a place to work from home. And people now value that now, and people that own it are keeping it, and people that don't own it want it. So you're seeing, so it's incredible how it's gone
It's definitely true that people's preferences of housing have changed as a result of COVID. So where there was a trend prior to COVID to inner city living and apartments, now people want bigger houses, they want a backyard, they want a separate room that they can use as a home office. So people are wanting to upgrade. People's preferences have definitely changed as a result of COVID, and that's, probably driving a lot of the demand as well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and that's why the market for certain types of property is a little bit different. For units and high-rise apartments and so on. Yeah.
I want to come back to that in a minute, but first I just want to touch on rental values because they're still going up as well. And like we said, Adelaide's got really good rental yields. So the cash flow that you're getting from investment properties in Adelaide is, up with the best rental yields in the country. And Adelaide's gone up 8.5% in the last 12 months, which is, pretty good in the rental yields. So that's, are you sort of seeing, because you've got a really big property management business here at Turner as well, how are you seeing the rental yields play out, and how are you seeing demand and supply from rental properties versus tenants? And do you see that rental growth continuing in the future?
Well, I do, I think, because the rental market is very similar to the sales market, where the demand is extraordinarily high and there's just not as much available, which from a community perspective is worrying, because everyone needs a home, and generally if you can't buy one, you can generally rent one. So on many of our properties, albeit a year or two ago, we might get one application or 3 or something. Now we're getting upwards of 30. And if we've got an advertised rent amount, there's people just offering $30 or $50 more without any negotiation just to secure that. So we've had the highest
amazing,
rent.
Isn't it?
So we've had the highest rent growth in South Australia since 2007.
Wow.
So that's pretty cool. If you're an investor, not a tenant, of course.
Yes.
So that's probably the key stat. But in saying all this, and this is why the Adelaide market is so good for investors, both for buying, we're still the most affordable for buying.
Yes.
On average for the value of properties, and we're also the most affordable. We are the most affordable state in South Australia for rent. So the average is $447 a week. So yes, the affordability is there for buying. Yes, there's still a good market for tenants. The demand's very high. So you've got a good mix going there. I can't see the market really being too much different from where it currently is. I think it is going to continue like this all year.
So continue on the upward trend for the rest of 2022?
Yeah, so if you're an owner of property and you're an investor, yes, we're the most affordable state in Australia. We've seen a lot of interest from all over Australia, and it's very easy to find a tenant, and there is upward growth in rent yield. So I can't see that changing because all the fundamentals are still the same, and it's just going to continue. Yeah,
that's great news for, like you said, for property owners. But what does that mean for buyers? So one question that we're getting a lot from our clients is, people that have been wanting to buy a property for over 12 months now, and last year they just got buyer fatigue. They put in offer after offer after offer and attended auction after auction and just basically got rejected over and over again on multiple occasions. And many of them sort of dropped off at the end of last year thinking this is too hard. They needed a break from going to opens.
Yeah, fair enough.
But they still want to buy. They still want to buy a property. So they're coming back to us now saying, well, is now the right time or should we wait? It's really hard to to know what to tell them. So what advice would you have for buyers that have wanted to buy for some time now, stopped looking because they had a bit of buyer fatigue? Is now the time to get back in? If they don't get back in now, do they face potentially more house, like more value rise, which will make it even harder for them? Like, what would you tell them?
Well, I think they're on the right track in wanting to buy, and I feel very, I certainly feel for people that have not achieved that outcome yet. It would have been great if they bought at the beginning of last year, and they're probably sitting there fretting, just watching the market continue to rise, which I think it will continue to rise.
Yes.
ANZ forecasts average growth for South Australia this year to be between 6 and 9%. So it is going to keep moving.
Which will bring our growth over 30% for the, since
which you can
the
see
beginning.
happening. Now there is some talk of interest rates rise, and I think you live and breathe that sort of stat every day, Marissa.
Yeah.
I don't think that will quell the market very much. I think
Yeah.
the rises they're talking about are going to be very, very small. They will have an impact for sure, but they'll be very small. But and they might take a tiny bit of heat out of the market, but not much. But we're talking like growth last year in SA being around the 22% mark to 6 to 9%. So yes, it's not going to be as good, but it's still going to be there. I think we've talked about this in the past of trying to help buyers. There's a lot of agencies now like Turner that have very sophisticated websites where you can go onto the website and register as a buyer. You do see everything first. You get an automatic email, you come to our opens first, and that is a big thing that some of the agencies are doing before they're even going to majors. Some of them aren't even going on the major portals like realestate.com.au. So do that. But the other key, I reckon, is the first house or the house you might have your heart set on doesn't necessarily have to be your first one.
Yes.
Just get into the market, get into somewhere, maybe the adjacent suburb that's not quite on your radar or not as cool or not as appealing, or further south where there's incredible growth. Just get in the market.
Yeah, as soon as possible.
Just buy a property, and even if you keep renting, you can sit back knowing you own a property. You're now part of the market. You're rising with it. I think that's probably some good advice. Some people just wait, or maybe the criteria they've got for what they want to buy is too limited.
Yes.
Like it's just in a particular suburb, or it has to have this, or it has to have that. Maybe just be more flexible.
Yeah. Look, I think that's really good advice, because just getting your foot in the door is the hardest thing in the current market. But if you can just get your foot in the door, at least you're riding the wave with the growth, and you'll hopefully get to experience some of that growth, and then in the future, you'll be able to upgrade into something that's more closer to, what that dream home looks like.
Yep.
And for people that are considering selling, or maybe, wondering whether they should consider selling, what would your advice be to them at the moment?
Well, I think it is a seller's market, and it has been for many, many years. In fact, with all the properties we manage, one of the issues I've got as a business owner is that some of our landlords are selling, and we're seeing a slightly higher rate of that occurring. And look, good on them. Some of them have held these investment properties for 10, 15 years or more. They've had to deal with maintenance and a few other things, and maybe the odd tenant that was a bit difficult to handle. So, and they might be older too, and they want to realise their value. So we are seeing a lot of more sales going on in that regard, which is good for buyers, of course. So it frees up those properties and brings it back into the system. But I think it is definitely a seller's market right now, and that's why so many properties are going to auction. That's why the clearance rates are so high. It is just a rising market, and it's still rising.
So in summary, looks like interest rates are going to stay low for some time, although they will rise at some point, so be prepared for that. Lockie, you've suggested that prices are going to continue to grow and rents will continue to grow, and I've got to say I agree with that. Okay. The fundamentals are there to support that. So if you are a buyer, it's probably important that you get your ducks lined up in a row and try and get into the market as soon as you can. And if you are considering selling, then now is a good time to do that as well, to bring more stock onto the market. So good news all round.
Yeah. And all the very best to the buyers, and those people out there trying to find a property, and also to the tenants. Again, it's a genuine tool, and we're proud of it and how much it can help people. But you can register as a buyer and a tenant. Just go to turnerrealestate.com.au. It's a free service, and you'll be in our system, and that's sort of a great way to be, see those rentals and those sale properties first. So,
awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today. We'll be back with you for another quarterly update in 3 months. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.